iPhone 15, 8 months later. Yes, my friends, it has been 8 months since this beautiful phone came out back in September of 2023, and a lot of things have changed in this 8 months. I mean, we've had new phones from the competition, like the Galaxy S24. We've been able to compare it against its older brother, like the iPhone 14 or 13 or 12. We've been able to also compare it against its bigger brother, so to say, the iPhone 15 Pro, that's a little bit better. And so we have a lot of conclusions about this phone, and it's also a very interesting time because the new iPhone 16s are right around the corner, and a lot of people are wondering if it is a good idea to spend money on this phone if in a couple months we are going to have a new version of this phone that's going to be better and very likely is going to have the same price. So in this video, I'm going to answer all of those questions so you make a good purchasing decision. At the end of the day, this is an expensive device. You don't want to make mistakes. You don't want to buy the wrong phone. As always, let's begin by talking about the exterior design, which, as you can see, is quite similar to the one on the iPhone 14. A lot of people, to the untrained eye, so to say, casual people, are not going to be able to tell the difference. I mean, they both have the same camera layout, they both have the same size, they both have the same physical appearance. They are almost identical, but there are some differences with this iPhone 15. Mainly that it has slightly curved edges as opposed to the 14, which makes it a bit more comfortable to hold in your hand. And it has a new dynamic island. I almost forgot. We're going to talk about it later in the display category. And it has USB-C. This is a very big advantage as opposed to the Lightning connector on the iPhone 14 because now we are going to be able to connect it to pretty much every cable and every accessory there is on the market, even if it's for Android phones. You'll see it later. Like, this is an amazing advancement that, well, Apple didn't choose to do. They kind of got forced by the EU. That's why they did it, but they did it anyways, and that benefits every single iPhone user on the planet. But besides that, as I said, it's a very similar phone. It has the same size, the same form factor, the same flat sides, even if they are a little curved. And it has the same, this is something a lot of people don't know, has the same switch for silent mode. A lot of people think that the iPhone 15s, they all have the new action button, but no, that's only for the iPhone 15 Pros. The normal 15s still have the old silent switch, so that's kind of disappointing. It comes in a bunch of colors, more specifically black, blue, green, yellow, and red, even though most of those colors are very, very pale. I mean, as you can see, this is technically the blue color, but it looks almost white. If you compare it to the real white color on the iPhone 14, it does look like this is like a warmer white and this is like a colder white, but they both look white. If you ask someone in the street what color do they think this phone is, they are probably going to say white. And I'm putting the phone against a white desk. So this is the environment where you're going to see the biggest contrast between white and the real color of the phone. And even then, it looks pretty much identical to the color of the desk. So yeah, if you wanted a colored phone, this is not a good year to buy an iPhone. But besides that, I also wanted to talk about durability because since it's been 8 months since the phone came out, I feel like a lot of people want to know how the phone holds up in terms of durability. Does it get scratches on the sides? Does it break easily? And in my case, I've personally had the phone without a case for all this time, meaning I've never slapped a screen protector. I've never slapped a case on the phone, so I've always used it naked. And as you can see, it's held up incredibly well. There's absolutely no scratches on the sides. There's absolutely no scratches on the back or on the front. As you can see, the display has some fingerprints on the surface, but there's no scratches. Absolutely no scratches on the display. And I have used it naked. So, I mean, of course, if you use it very roughly and you drop it in hard surfaces and if it drops from your pocket to the floor, it's definitely going to get dented, or even worse, it's going to break the glass. But if you are careful with the phone, you don't even have to wear a case for the phone to last without it, feeling old or feeling worn down. Another very big advantage on the iPhone 15 is that it got a new processor, the A16 Bionic chip. And I say this because with the iPhone 14, we got the same processor that we got on the 13, the A15 Bionic. And there was a lot of pessimistic people thinking that we were going to have the same processor once again on the 15, but no, we got the A16 and it flies. I don't want to be repetitive because I feel like I say this in every iPhone video, but it does feel super smooth. And of course, I mean, it's a high-end processor on a brand new phone. It's actually made specifically for iOS 17. This is the first operative system on this phone, so of course, it is going to be super smooth in everything you do. Every app you try to open, everything you try to do on the phone, it's going to feel super smooth. Maybe with the exception of the, I guess, sensation of fluidity, because in this case, we have a 60 Hz display as opposed to the 120 Hz display on the iPhone 15 Pro. We're going to talk about this later when we talk about the displays in detail, but you can tell the difference, in my personal opinion at least. Of course, some other people are not going to notice, but in my case, I do notice a difference between 60 Hz and 120 Hz. But overall, if you were wondering if after 8 months, after installing apps and after using the phone for this time, it got slower, no, it has not gotten slower. It still feels incredibly fast, incredibly smooth, and you're going to have an amazing experience with the iPhone 15. I think this is not a surprise. This is a very expensive phone, so it should perform incredibly well. But what about games? What about if you want to play casual games like Subway Surfers or Zombie Apocalypse or one of those casual phone games? Well, for the surprise of absolutely no one, they all work amazing. They load up in like a matter of seconds. They work at the maximum frame rates with maximum resolutions. They never give you any bugs or any issues. I mean, we're talking about games that are meant to be played in pretty much every phone in the market, from the cheapest to the most expensive. So of course, in one of the most expensive phones on the market right now, they are going to feel and work amazing. The only game where I did notice you cannot maybe reach the maximum potential performance, I guess you could say, is on Genshin Impact. In this game, you can play up to high settings at 60 FPS if you want to have a stable experience. If you go beyond that, meaning ultra settings or 120 FPS, yes, it is going to work and you're going to be able to play the game that way, but it's not going to be as stable because you're basically asking for a lot more resources than the phone has. So it's going to, have some hiccups, some bugs, some issues because the phone is not able to keep up with the game. But if you play it high settings, 60 FPS, it works amazing. And we're talking about a very, very demanding game. I don't want you to get discouraged because of this. This is a insanely powerful game. It plays on PC, it plays on consoles, and most phones are not able to play high settings in a stable way. So this is a feat, even though you may not feel like it. Actually, the only phone that's given me a better experience is the iPhone 15 Pro, with which I have been able to play high settings 120 FPS. That being said, as I said earlier, the iPhone 15 is not able to reproduce 120 Hz, so even if it could potentially play at that frame rate, you would not tell the difference from 60, so it actually doesn't really matter. When it comes to the software, it is running iOS 17.5, so the latest version of the operating system, and as I said earlier, it is the native version of iOS for the iPhone 15, so it's not been updated ever to any new versions of the operating system, so it's going to work insanely smooth. And for those wondering if after 6 months, as I said, it has shown any signs of aging, it has shown any sign of, because this happened before. If you downloaded a bunch of apps and you used the phone for a while, it started getting slower with time. And that's something that definitely doesn't happen with this iPhone 15 and pretty much any iPhone. I mean, I've had a bunch of iPhones over the past, 10 years I've been an iPhone user, and I've never experienced an iPhone slowing down because you install more apps or because you use it for a longer time. The only instance where I feel like they tend to slow down is when you install the latest supported version of iOS, meaning the iPhone 5 got updated until iOS 10. Well, if you run the iPhone 5 on iOS 10, it's going to feel slow. The iPhone 10 got updated, I think, until iPhone 15. If you run the iPhone 10 on iOS 15, it's going to feel a little slow. If you update it to the last supported version, it's going to feel a little cranky. But besides that, I mean, I'm sure that on iOS 20, this iPhone 15 is still going to run very, very, very well. Which, by the way, quick note in that regard, I just said that the iPhone 15 feels incredible on iOS 17. The iPhone 14 also feels incredible on iOS 17, so it's not like you need to get the latest version of the phone to have a nice experience. I'm sure on an iPhone 11, on an iPhone 12, you're also going to have a great experience. We've gotten to a point where most modern phones have spare performance, so they can update for like 6-7 years into the future. So yeah, even if you buy an older phone, you're going to have a great experience. Quickly, I want to talk about the battery life. Of course, this is not a technical test. This is solely based on my experience, but as you can see, I mean, I've tried a bunch of 6.1-inch phones from Apple and from the competition, and so I can give you a decent idea on how good the battery life on the iPhone 15 is. Having compared it to all of these phones, having used all of these phones at some point as my personal device, I can tell you that they are all incredibly similar. At the end of the day, there's a physical limitation to what you can fit into a 6.1-inch form factor. There's so much battery you can fit in this size. So even though some of these phones like the Galaxy S24 and the iPhone 15 are, I guess, a little bit better because maybe they have a better battery to consumption ratio, or because they have more modern technologies, they last a little bit better than the 15 Pro and the 14, so we could separate these in two groups, the fine and the slightly better group. But if you want the definitive battery life experience, you will always have to go for like a big phone, a plus size or a Pro Max phone, like the 14 Plus, 15 Plus, or Pro Max, or the Ultra in the case of Samsung. And finally, let's talk about probably one of the most interesting parts of the iPhone 15, which is the display. I mean, when this phone came out, I was very excited about its display because for the first time on the normal iPhone, we got 2000 nits of brightness. We got a better panel that was better calibrated. We got the dynamic island, and it was feeling like, oh, Apple's finally giving the normal phone a big upgrade in terms of display. But once again, they chose to not include 120 hertz. They only included it on the Pro phone. And as I said, this is something where most people don't really seem to tell the difference unless you put both side by side and you force them to notice the little details. They just don't care. But for geeks and techies like me, this sucks, because even though it's a very fast 60 Hz panel, Apple is doing, its classic magic to make it feel as smooth as possible. So it's definitely better than a normal 60 Hz display when it comes to fluidity. It still doesn't feel as smooth as a 120 Hz display. It just, I don't know, especially when you use a 120 Hz device for a long time, you use it as your personal device and you switch back to a 60 Hz one, you do notice a difference. But I mean, besides that, I have to say this is an amazing panel. The dynamic island is a bit disappointing though. I mean, being an iPhone user, having used a phone with a dynamic island and a phone with a notch, and having compared both in terms of usability and practicality, I can tell you that it is a sleek new feature. It makes notifications and pop-ups be more optimized because they're integrated into the dynamic island, so they take up less space. But beyond that, it is just a gimmick. It's a nice thing that looks more modern, looks more futuristic, but it doesn't add any functionality that we didn't have on older iPhones. So I would not be crazy about the notch. If you're thinking of, oh, maybe I should spend more money on the 15 because it has the dynamic island instead of buying an older iPhone, I don't think it should be a reason to upgrade, especially with these phones costing, with the right with sales tax and the right storage capacity, they can cost up to $1,000. So I would not upgrade just because of the dynamic island. And of course, we also have to talk about the cameras, which are probably one of the best components on this phone, because we got the same ultra wide camera, the same 12 megapixels, the same sensor, the same optics, and it's still, it's good, but it's not the best. But we got a huge main camera update. Now we get 48 megapixels instead of 12. We get a bigger sensor, we get better optics, and for the first time with a normal iPhone that's not Pro, we get optical zoom. This is not digital. A lot of people think it's just zooming in from the main camera, but no, this is actually a 2x camera that's inside of the main camera, because they've made it big enough where they can fit another camera inside of it that's a little closer, that's a little more zoomy, and still make it be big enough that you can take decent pictures with it. As you can see, it doesn't really doesn't really feel like a worse camera when you switch from the main one to the one that's inside of the main one. Although it is not going to be as sharp because the main camera can take up to 48 megapixel photos, and the zoom camera can only take up to 12 megapixel photos and videos. Something very surprising is that it retains the same resolutions in video. You can shoot up to 4K 60 FPS video with the cropped camera. So just to give you an example, this is the kind of range you get now with the iPhone 15. This is the ultra wide camera, so it's pretty wide. You can take, group photos where you want everything to fit into the frame. You can take main camera photos, which look incredible because we get this larger sensor that gives us a more natural depth of field, a more sense of like a, maybe not professional camera, but it starts feeling like something you could use to post a high definition, high quality photo to your social media, or even print a photo. You can frame it and have it in your house. And then we get, of course, the zoom camera, the 2x camera, which I have to say, it is maybe not as sharp as the main camera, but it is surprisingly good. In fact, in the normal iPhone 15 Pro, a lot of times Apple chooses to use this mechanism to take zoom photos instead of the dedicated zoom camera, because usually the zoom camera on phones is so small, and not on Apple alone, on Samsung phones in general, like the zoom camera tends to be smaller. So because I don't think they can afford to use 3 proper nice sensors and nice optics on all 3 cameras. So they use very good optics, very good sensors on the main camera, and then they use mediocre optics, mediocre sensors on the other 2 cameras. So what Apple usually does is, if there's bad lighting conditions, they prefer to zoom in on the main camera than to use the zoom camera, the dedicated zoom camera. So in a lot of ways, you're not missing out anything as opposed to the Pro phone in this case, which is pretty amazing. So is the iPhone 15 worth it in this ocean of options we have right now, and 3 months before the iPhone 16s come out? Well, in my opinion, if you really need a new phone, I definitely would encourage you to buy the iPhone 15 or any of these other phones, which are also great. I feel like nowadays there's no bad phones. There's just a little bit more expensive, a little bit less expensive, phones with a little bit better camera, phones with a little bit better of that, and you just have to choose which one fits your necessities the better. But they are all amazing. There's no bad phones nowadays, So if you need a new phone and you don't want to wait with a crappy phone, or you just don't have any phones at all, you need to update right now, yes, I would encourage you to buy a 15. If you have an iPhone 13 or an iPhone 12 and you just want to update because you want to have a little bit better experience, yes, in that case, you should probably wait 3-4 months and get the 16, because you have a decent phone, you can use it, it's fine. And you're not going to feel that big of an update if you buy an iPhone 15. As I said earlier, you have discount links for all of these phones down below in the description, just in case at the end of the video you want to take a look. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I see you all in the next one.